Welcome back to another episode of Trash Talk. I'm Jon-Bernard. This is Nick. We are the Kairouz Brothers. This is where we tell you what's going on in the world of combat sports. Nick, again, Nate Diaz fought over the weekend. Nothing big happening after UFC 303.
Well, 303 was a bit of a disappointment, as we mentioned last week. The biggest thing from last week, Masvidal versus Nate Diaz. I thought the fight was actually not going to happen. I thought it was going to be one of those fights they just talk about it and it would never happen. Actually happened.
Well, listen, the whole lead up to this fight was Nate Diaz saying, fuck this, I don't want to do this. So I'm with you. I'm surprised that it happened. He didn't want to do the media. Even when he did the media, he was chasing Neon outside, making him shit his pants. The streamer who was trolling him during the media. Apparently, look, I caught the highlights of it. I'm not going to say I watched the full fight. I was looking for an illegal stream, couldn't find one. But apparently it's one of the most entertaining boxing fights of the year from two former MMA fighters.
Well, the thing is, when it comes to boxers that aren't professionals, they just throw. And that's when, as an audience member, someone that's in the crowd, you just want people to throw. You want someone to get knocked out and you want to see punches thrown. So that's why it was one of the best fights this year in boxing.
Yeah, you had a bit of the taunts from Nate Diaz as well, the classic walk away and then sock him
when has anyone ever been disappointed by a Nate Diaz fight? Hardly ever.
He's got one of the best chins in the game, but we'll touch on Nate Diaz a bit later. Let's go with the MMA hot take of the week, Nick. What's the hot take of the week?
The hot take this week is the Michael Chandler-McGregor fight will not go ahead. It will never happen, but it's a pipe dream for Michael Chandler. You're never going to get your fight against Conor McGregor.
Well, the MMA hot take, like Nick said, is the Michael Chandler fight with Conor McGregor will not happen. And I agree with you. I don't think it's going to happen. The reason I would hold out a little bit of hope for Michael Chandler is there's been negotiations, allegedly. He sat down with Dana and Hunter and said they're working on a new date. Conor McGregor comes out and says, yeah, we're working on a new date. He's showing videos of him training online. So he's definitely going to fight. I hope he fights. But more and more people are starting to believe Chandler's not going to get this fight.
You don't agree with me because I'm of the position that the fight is going to go ahead. I think McGregor has put too many chips onto the fact that I'm fighting Michael Chandler. Firstly, when he signed up to do the Ultimate Fighter, that's the first time you're going to fight this person. The second one is he could have pulled out of the fight much earlier. He did try to come back from the bruised toe. The press conference was a bit of a mishap. They probably could have announced that earlier. But if you're talking about a future date, and Helwani, who's always got good mail, he's saying that it's going to happen at a future date.
The reason why I'm saying it's not going to happen is because they've already offered Michael Chandler Islam Makhachev. They're trying to give him alternative fights.
Allegedly.
Apparently it was on the table. So if you're giving this guy, listen, mate, take this fight, it's probably best. Otherwise, you're just jobless. You're sitting out. You haven't fought in almost 2 years. It's time you just take a fight. And if he doesn't take a fight, you know what? You're just waiting around for Conor McGregor?
Michael Chandler's last fight was losing by submission to Dustin Poirier. He did just fight for the title, so maybe he is worthy of a title shot. But he wants to fight McGregor. That's the money fight. Fighting McGregor is worth more than fighting Islam Makhachev for the title. Legacy, money, whatever you want it to be, that's going to go down better in his career for him.
I don't think the UFC want this fight to happen. It's very expensive. You're at the behest of Conor McGregor, whether he wants to drop out or not. They had the highest earning gate of the year to over $20 million for Conor McGregor to snap his fingers and say, I'm out. They're not going to go see Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor. They're going to go see Conor McGregor fight. So this fight can happen with anyone else. They want to see him return. Michael Chandler is just, you do what you're told.
You do what you're told.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, you want to fight at 170?
I don't see... I think it's less likely that it's going to happen.
The only problem for Michael Chandler, if you look at the negatives, the fact that he's had to wait over 2 years already.
And it means nothing.
It's already been cancelled on a bruised toe. It's not very confident. Conor McGregor's a movie star now. A movie opportunity could come up. Yeah, he goes, you fight again. There's too many things that could happen where the fight would be cancelled. And the fact that there's no official date at the moment does make it scary.
Well, speaking about Conor McGregor, this week he took to Twitter and showed that he was getting behind his old rival Nate Diaz and said, listen, I've versed him before. I'm going with him. He put $500,000 on Nate Diaz, the underdog in the fight against George Masvidal, and collected $1.6 million.
Well, that's pocket change for Conor McGregor.
$1.3 million.
$500,000, that's pocket change for McGregor. He's putting on that bet. That's like me putting a $50 bet on.
Well, after he won, he tweeted, this is just yacht fuel. He showed his $1.3 million winning. He showed his $1.3 million winnings and said, this is yacht fuel. So I don't know if we'll ever get to that sort of money. But again, I think it shows that McGregor's fight IQ is still high. He's been in the octagon with Nate, knows his boxing style. He's a stand-up fighter. Gets won him. Nate was an underdog going into this fight. It was about $2-3.
Well, I didn't think that he would win coming off the BMF title loss to Jorge Masvidal. So Conor McGregor, maybe he's got the inside the cage knowledge. He knew in a boxing match maybe he would scrap a bit better. But they're much older. Like it was a 50-50 fight. Like McGregor, you're not Mystic Mac calling the fight the way it went. But The bet slip shows he won money. He's the genius.
What do you do with $1.3 million if you're Conor McGregor? Like, I mean, you already you got proper 12. You've got your movies. You've got you're a superstar
solution.
in yourself.
Use $1.3 million as rehab for your toe.
Very
An
true.
extra $1.3 million. It's rumored LeBron and Russell Wilson spend over $1 million on their rehab for their body throughout the year. Maybe do the same program as LeBron because he's never injured.
Put that $1.3 million into your training camp and let's see you back in the octagon.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, again, just on another point, Charles Sonnen, he calls bullshit. He thinks he didn't bet on this at all. Unless he's showing the stacks of money behind the cashier, that money was never put on.
So you want to see him, go to the Las Vegas teller and say, "Can I have my check for $1.3 million?"
Well, Charles Sonnen wants it.
Does Drake show when he collects a bet or not? It's all on his bet slip online. I don't know. Have you seen a bet slip?
I haven't seen the bet slip.
I just saw the tweet. I'm putting $500,000 on it. I'm going to take Conor McGregor at his word.
I will take him at his word as well, especially because he carries that cash. He does have that money
I don't
behind
know if
him.
he's carrying $500K on him, but it's probably in an account.
In the bank account.
He's got it in an account.
Not hard
somewhere.
cash, but in the bank account.
Well, Nate Diaz post-fight, after Nate Diaz beat George Masvidal, he calls for a UFC title shot, calls out Leon Edwards. What's next for Nate Diaz?
Well, he did call out Leon Edwards. He wants a title fight, but he's definitely not going to get it. I think the more realistic possibility is the other call out he made, which was to Jake Paul. I think he can fight Jake Paul in a boxing fight.
But he's already been knocked out by Jake Paul.
Nate Diaz?
Yeah,
but it wasn't like, it was his first boxing fight. Give him another chance.
No. Listen, there's a big difference. Jake Paul's a young calf, okay? Nate Diaz, George Masvidal, they're old, aging bulls that are UFC fighters, which is the prime prey for Jake Paul, okay? He was one fight Anderson Silva. He just wants to knock out these blokes. He's already knocked him out. I think why Nate Diaz jumped on that is for the money, obviously.
Exactly.
Jake Paul's saying he offered him $15 million for a fight. I don't know if Jake Paul's doing those numbers, but regardless, I don't want to see another Nate Diaz, Jake Paul fight. I want to see Nate Diaz back in the UFC having a John Cena, Kobe Bryant-like retirement run. Give me who I want on the way out. Nate Diaz, for the UFC legend that he is, deserves a retirement run in the UFC. Pick a fighter, pick whoever it is in the welterweight division. Even if you have to go up, I don't care. I want to see Nate Diaz back in the UFC. If it's a Conor McGregor rematch, if it's a Leon Edwards title fight, I don't care. I want to see him back in the UFC.
Firstly, he's a Hall of Famer, but don't put him in the John Cena, Kobe type of arguments, okay? He was never a champion, okay? So just calm down.
Okay.
Nate Diaz can fight Conor McGregor. That'd be a great finish to his career. They finally get the trilogy. It actually makes more sense for him to fight McGregor than Michael Chandler. But other than that, I don't really think they want him back in the UFC. Once you go to boxing, it's very rarely you come back into the UFC. Only McGregor's done it. That's it. He's made his choice. He's gone over to another promotion. You're done. That's it. Fight Jake Paul. Get your money right off into the sunset.
Ryan's also corrected me. He didn't knock out Jake Paul. He got knocked down. He got knocked down heavily, but he did lose by decision. Okay. He did lose by decision.
And that was probably rigged.
Okay. Going on to UFC news. Jones versus Miocic is pretty much a done deal. Jon Jones has taken to Instagram. He's saying in November at Madison Square Garden, it's a return to heavyweight. He's still the heavyweight champion, but it's him allegedly. It hasn't been fully announced yet, but it's going to be Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, heavyweight title on the line. But are these two holding up the heavyweight division? That's the question.
100% they are, because if you're Stipe, you haven't fought in just over 3 years. I think once he actually gets into the octagon in November, that'll be 4 years out of the octagon.
Jeez.
So if you're coming off a 4-year hiatus, yes, you're the greatest heavyweight of all time. If you're coming off a 4-year hiatus and then you go straight into a title fight, you're holding up the division, because if you were really that hungry, you would have fought Tom Aspinall here in Manchester. Why are you waiting for Jon Jones?
When you're saying holding up the division's still going. Tom Aspinall's still taking fights. He's the interim heavyweight champion.
This is the only time an interim title has been defended on another fight. Like, it's been fought, him and Pavlovich. There's the second time only that they've had another fight for an interim champion.
But we're still
this time it's for the champion.
We're still getting good heavyweight fights. I know you want to see the title be defended online and who's a true heavyweight. It's unfortunate what happened to Jon Jones, but I don't think they are holding up the division. Thing is, with Stipe Miocic, the only thing I'm worried about, the last time we saw him, he could barely make a walk out. Do the walk. He looked like he was limping. It was hard to watch. It looked like he needed a walker.
He's an old man.
How's he going to go against I'm not going to say prime Jon Jones, but a Jon Jones that just walked through Cyril Gane? I don't know. I think if I'm Stipe, I don't want this fight. I know it's your last payday, but seriously, just call it a day and let Jon Jones move on to Tom Aspinall. Let him move on to bigger and better things like Alex Pereira.
Because of the age of Stipe Miocic, that's another factor of why he's holding up the division. If you're saying if he's old enough, he shouldn't even be fighting Jon Jones, then he's holding up the division. He's in a place that he should not be. And Tom Aspinall, He wants Jon Jones. He's called him out multiple times. And again, you're preventing a Pereira fight from happening. So Stipe is holding it up, but as the greatest heavyweight of all time, you can do whatever you want. You deserve this. He deserves a fight against Jon Jones. Jon Jones wants it for the legacy.
Yeah.
So they're both just calling the shots, and you can't argue
And
with
to
them.
play devil's advocate, GSP did stay out for 4 years before coming back and beating Michael Bisping for the title.
He retired as champion, though. He retired as a champion. Stipe retired off what? He got knocked out by Francis Ngannou. I can't remember his last fight.
Pretty bad knockout.
So
it was. Yeah, it looked like he snapped his ACL in that knockout.
You're comparing apples and oranges there, okay? That's completely different. GSP had only lost 2 fights in his career and avenged those 2 losses, retired as champion. He deserved to go up. He could call the shots whatever he wants. Same as Jon Jones. No one complained when Jon Jones came back and moved up. That's the GSP one. Stipe, you're coming back, you're old, you don't deserve the shot.
Well, that's the Madison Square Garden card. Talking about someone who's just recently allowed in the United States. Shah the Bullet.
He's rolling around the US. I thought he wasn't allowed in. There was rumors across Twitter, X, I should say, that he was not allowed into the United States. That's why he can only fight in Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia. But you see him rolling around with Dana, rolling around with Hunter. He's enjoying the US.
He's had his meetings in the US. Apparently, he's filming. He's starting a movie. He's actually filming. He's playing a serial killer that's a UPS driver. I don't know if you've seen the screenshots of him being a UPS driver.
Just for the record, we did call that earlier. We interviewed him in Abu Dhabi last year. We said he has the makings of a Bond villain.
I said, listen, mate, you're one of the scariest fighters I've ever seen in my life. You look like a movie villain. You know, what's next for you in the UFC?
Do we get a kickback for the hiring?
No, I mean, I think we played a part in the casting because we did cast him as a Bond villain. But what's good about Shah is he's allowed in the UFC. He's called out Kevin Holland, says, I'm ready to fight in the US. So Kevin Holland's spoken to Dana, spoken to Hunter, said they want to make this fight happen as well. Who do you want to see Shah fight in the US? Because previously, honestly, his fights have been absolute layups for him. It's like the Saudis and the people in Abu Dhabi and Dana have just been serving this guy a platter of fights.
Well, because I'm a fan of Shara, I don't want him to go too hard too early, and that is Bo Nickel. Bo Nickel would be a great fight. Dagestan versus American wrestling.
Bo Nickel called it, said, give me Bullet.
He said he wants the fight as well, but I feel like that's a bit too much for Shara too early. I don't think he's ready for that yet. Let him verse someone like Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland's the perfect warm-up fight. Kevin Holland takes any fight, anytime, anywhere. He does talk the talk, and he does walk the walk. And that's what makes Kevin Holland such a good UFC fighter. And against Shara, it's a 50-50 fight. I'd probably give the edge to Kevin Holland based off Shara's 2 fights, but it's a good tune-up fight for Shara.
Because we were always told that because he has one eye, that no commission is ever going to allow him to fight in the US.
And
that's
also,
why
he
fights in Abu Dhabi.
Criminal record.
I don't know about his criminal past. I'm not going to bring that up because I do see him in person when we have to interview him.
No,
I wanted to go smooth. I like Shara. I'm a big fan of Shara.
I'm just pointing out that he did bash someone in a shopping center. I'm not saying that it was good or wrong, bad or good.
Regardless, I like seeing him in the US. I want to see how his film career goes. I'm not really too concerned about whether he fights Kevin Holland or Bo Nickel. How's he going to go in the movie?
He looks like maybe not the head villain, but one of the goons that can kind of run the air and the henchman. That's the word I'm looking for.
Well, GSP was a henchman in an Avengers
Captain
film.
America.
Exactly right. So, I don't know. I think he's got a bright future as a villain going forward, Shara. But I do want to see him fight in the US. Whether it's Kevin Holland, I want to see Bo Nickel definitely before the end of the year. You can't just have one fight this year. Whether he's going to be in Abu Dhabi, I don't know, but it's interesting. It's definitely interesting.
What's happening with Bo Nickel? He said he got the call up for the Saudi Arabia card, but he was in the Montana mountains.
He was in the mountains now.
What's his plan for the rest of the year? Who does he want to fight?
I don't know if he put on his Instagram that he wants to fight at Madison Square Garden or he's going to be on the Sphere. He put up something pretty much confirming a date that's saying he's going to fight this year.
Oh, man.
You can't,
Hurry up.
The fighters that have put out dates have been Jon Jones. That's pretty much locked in November. Bo Nickel's put up a date and Conor McGregor previously, but we're just going to ignore that one. So
fighters usually don't lie. Is that what you're saying?
No. It's pretty much locked in. But now there is UFC Noche. That is now the UFC Sphere card, which is UFC 306.
Riyadh season.
Yeah, it's a Riyadh season card, Saudi Arabian card, which makes me think the Saudis are pumping absolute millions into this card. It is going to be a stacked card. Sugar Sean O'Malley's come out and said he doesn't know whether he's going to be on this card yet. He doesn't know whether he's going to fight in September or he's going to fight later in December. He seemed pretty bummed out that he's out of the loop. He's one of their biggest superstars, doesn't know whether he's going to fight or not.
Allegedly.
Where does Sugar Sean fit? Does he fit on the Sphere card? Should he wait till the end of the year? And who should he fight next?
Well, when you're scrolling Twitter, when you're scrolling Instagram and you see potential fight cards after the Saudi investment into 306, the lineup is it's going to be better than UFC 100. I've seen rumors of Sugar Sean versus Merab, McGregor Chandler on there. I've seen other fights on there. Aljamain could be on there. There's so many potential fighters that could be on this card.
Everyone wants the Sphere. I mean, Aljamain Sterling called out Diego Lopez for the Sphere.
Exactly. And then there's other fights like, what's his face? Topuria Holloway. They could be on the sphere.
That's not going to be, no.
You never know, though. That's what I'm saying. If the Saudis want something done, they could be bumping fights, changing fights. And that means Sugar Sean, if he wants the main event, it's probably not going to be at UFC.
I think the reason why Sugar Sean doesn't know whether he's main eventing the sphere or not is because we're waiting to hear from Conor McGregor. If Conor McGregor is going to headline a card, if he's going to headline the sphere, he has to be the main event. And I know Sugar Sean said, listen, I'll co-main on a Conor card. But at the end of the day, you don't need to. The UFC wants to make money. They want to, space out their main event. So I could see Sugar Sean having to wait till the end of the year if McGregor's going to be on that card.
You just hope that one of them is before December. Because it's like, McGregor obviously hasn't fought in a while, but Sugar Sean, he fought what, in March? Like, that's a big... yes, he probably did cop a bit of damage from Cheeto in that fight. But you can't be having...
Jeez.
I want my title fights to be within 3 to 4 months of each fight. Like, unless you're seriously injured, there's got to be more activity from champions. And credit to Sugar Sean, he wants to fight. It's the UFC that's delaying him. But let's make something happen, please.
I think the UFC sphere attraction in itself, being at the sphere, all the fighters have been calling out and saying, I want to be on this card. But at the end of the day, if McGregor's on the card, there's not going to likely be a title fight on the card. So that's why I think Topuria's already rumored for Idaho. Is that where it is? UFC Utah. Topuria's already rumored for UFC Utah. If Sugar Sean doesn't know now if he's going to be on the sphere, I don't know if he wants to know 2 months in advance.
Well, I feel like they're
going to give him at least adequate notice to defend his title.
He knows his opponent. It's going to be Merab. He knows it's going to be on the back end of the year, September to December. Mm-hmm. So whichever one, just be ready. That's what, you can't really complain too much. At least you've got an opponent and time frame.
Well, Nick, I don't know if you saw the news, but Dana White has been raving on about Power Slap. After UFC 303, that they rolled that big weekend in International Fight Week with Power Slap on the Friday, UFC on the Saturday. It's becoming a package deal now.
Well, I feel like after every single Power Slap event, Dana White says this is going to be the biggest thing ever. It's going to be the biggest sporting franchise in the world.
Well, he's fielding the questions about them. He does the Power Slap post-fight press conferences. He always gets asked. He's always talking about the social numbers, whether it's bigger than all the sports combined, whether it's bigger than MLB, NHL, all their social numbers. And I think he's talking about TikTok views most of the time, TikTok and Instagram reels. And I think he corrected himself. I don't know if he's necessarily talking about followers. Do you genuinely see Power Slap being a serious sport? So much so, Dana White has said the Power Slap will be bigger than the UFC. He's on record saying that. Do you think Power Slap will be bigger than the UFC?
I don't believe that for a second. There's no way the UFC would surrender its position as a top combat sport to Power Slap. Power Slap, it's too simple. And again, it's a spectacle, yes. It's getting a bit of numbers on socials, but no one knows the fighters. I can't name a Power Slap athlete, can you?
Paige Van Zandt, yes I can, yeah.
She's just a UFC fighter transitioned over.
Well, she did very well.
That's like naming Brock Lesnar as a UFC fighter.
Okay, you're right. I can't name them all by name, but I do, when I see a Power Slap clip, I watch the clip because it is very entertaining. I like seeing two fat men slap each other in the face until they pass out. And the women are doing it now. Paige Van Zandt's gone from UFC to bare knuckle to OnlyFans, now to Power Slap. And she's got a career in it. I'm not going to lie. She took 4 slaps straight to the face. I say this to say, if Dana White is getting behind something, he was right about the UFC. He got on the UFC very early, invested in it while it was going downhill, made it the spectacle that it is today. If he's seeing commercial opportunity in Power Slap, it's probably going to be there. He's saying he's talking to all the major broadcasters about Power Slap. If he's talking to them, there's obviously some, at least social value to it. And with the way everyone's attention spans are now, people are veering away from pay-per-view and TV. And if it's a social sport, they're going to be off Rumble. They're talking to major broadcasters. I'm not going to say it's going to be bigger than the UFC, but I think there's some merit to it. That's all I'm saying.
It's fun to watch people get slapped in the face, but it is too simple. Like, it'll get repetitive. It's in its infancy. Once you see the same person get slapped in the face 10 times, are you going to get bored from it? Possibly.
Jake Shields, one of the better welterweights in the UFC, said, "No one, a fat man standing there and allowing another fat man slap him in the face will never be better or bigger than real fighting."
Thank you, Jake. That's exactly, you articulated exactly what I wanted to say. I just couldn't find the words.
I'm just saying Dana White thinks otherwise. And when you bet against Dana White, he tends to prove you wrong regularly.
Well, I mean, whose opinion are you going to take, mine or Dana White on combat sports? You probably take Dana's. So yeah. I've got to surrender the argument there.
Well, Nick, this week we are at the halfway mark of the fight season, if you want to put it that way. We're at the halfway of the half year mark.
Mid-year.
We're at the mid-year mark of
the financial year.
It's the end of the financial year, but we're at the mid-year of UFC pay-per-views. There's been some interesting fights, but we want to give out some mid-season awards this year, starting with the best KO of the year so far.
Best knockout of the year has to be Max Holloway knocking out Justin Gaethje. He pointed to the middle of the ring, and they traded off, and he knocked him out as a buzzer beater. 2 seconds left, bang, he's shot dead to the floor.
That's easily the knockout of the year.
It could be the greatest knockout of all time, so obviously it's going to be the best of this year.
Some people have called it the greatest knockout of all time, mainly because it's UFC 300. It was a massive occasion. They were fighting for the BMF title. They point to the spot. He knocks him out. One of the most brutal knockouts of all time.
$600,000 bonus for
Massive.
Max Holloway.
And he deserved it, Max Holloway. But in saying that, I do want to shout out Alex Pereira.
Jamal Hill grabbed the balls.
Just knocks out Jamal Hill, just says, Herb Dean, just stop for 1 second. Let me just KO this bloke. Knocks him straight out. Yes, it was a bit underwhelming of a main event fight, but to do that after Jamal Hill was talking all this shit, straight, clean right hand, I think that's up there, but nothing's going to beat Max Holloway.
It's a it
was a patent left hook from Alex Pereira.
But again, great knockout, but it's just nothing was going to beat Holloway.
Okay, who is the rising star in the UFC?
Ilia Topuria. He came in, talked the talk, and knocked out Volkanovski. Volkanovski, who was the king of the featherweight division, someone who probably has overtaken Jose Aldo as the king of that division. Topuria walks in and somehow knocks him out. And then before that fight, Topuria, yes, he was undefeated and was something of a rising star, but that solidified him as one of the top people in the UFC. Now he's trying to book fights with McGregor. He's trying to book fights with Sugar Sean. He's one of the biggest stars in the UFC, and he's spoken it into existence.
I would say there aren't too many people that have rose like Ilia Topuria this year. His following has gone up massively. He's massive in Madrid. He's massive in, his home country is
Georgia, Spain, and I think he's one other country he's associated with.
He's got quite a few nationalities. But like I said, he's grown in popularity just from capturing that title. He's calling out McGregor. He's calling out Sugar Sean. Second to, I'm not going to say this guy's a rising star because I think his star had already risen, but Alex Pereira, the way he's climbed up the rank and become almost the face of the UFC. But apart from Pereira, I think it is Ilia Topuria who's been the biggest rising star in the UFC.
Pereira has grown in superstardom, but he was already a star.
Who's been the biggest disappointment of the year?
Biggest
disappointment of the year so far?
Conor McGregor. I wanted to see him fight and he hasn't come back. I mean, I know can you win the award if you haven't fought?
Yeah, because he was announced for a card. He missed the press conference.
I feel like he's the biggest disappointment because I'm such a fan and I want to see him fight. And the fact that he hasn't fought all year, you're the biggest disappointment. I'm sorry, Conor.
I'm more disappointed in the fact that we might not see him again.
That's part of it. You're still the most disappointing fighter. If you're active, which he's considered active, he's disappointing.
Yeah, you can't blame him. He made his money. He's getting out of the fight game. I hope we see him. I don't know. I'm going to say my biggest disappointment of the year is Paulo Costa. We've been at both his fights this year, right? We saw him lose to Rob Whittaker. Then we see him lose to Sean Strickland in one of the most boring UFC fights. For a guy that talked the talk that whole week and said, we're going to go to war. We're two warriors. We respect each other. We're going to war. And then he was just on the back foot the whole fight while Sean Strickland was just trying to walk him down. Didn't engage, was trying to win on decision. He has been one of the more disappointing fighters. He's even addressed it and said, I've let you guys down. I'm not going to do this anymore. I think he fears that he may be cut from the UFC if he continues to fight like that. Again, if you're going to talk, and he's one of the most entertaining fighters on social media, but if you're going to talk, you got to back it up, Paulo, and I want to see you back it up. That's why you've been disappointing.
He's disappointing because if you look at his fights pre-Adesanya, he was the most entertaining fighter. He was never putting on a bad fight, and since then, I don't know, maybe he's trying to become a decision merchant, but that fight against Strickland was the worst fight of the year, so he could be the biggest disappointment.
Okay, who's been the punching bag of the year so far?
Chito Vera. I mean, if you watch that main event, he just spent 5 rounds getting belted. I mean, the knee to the jaw, the left hooks from Sugar Sean, he was just piecing him the whole fight.
That knee, we were in the arena. That knee, it sounded like it sounded like something broken. Yeah. The fact that nothing was broken was very surprising, but he did get bashed in that. Other than Chito Vera, I would say Johnny Walker. Every time he goes to the desert, he ends up on the canvas. He doesn't know where he is, and it's an anime style knockout. He's going in every single direction.
I'm surprised he doesn't do his ACL when he gets knocked out.
He's been one of the biggest punching bags in his division. But you're right, Chito Vera so far this year, I think the damage that he copped from Sugar Sean. Sugar Sean's one of the sharpest, fastest strikers in the UFC. And Chito Vera got pieced up.
Mate, that's why that you took. I think if you look at probably total punches on the year, he's probably still first. So that's punching bag definition.
Okay, who is your most delusional fighter this year?
Ian Gary. He's talked so much shit about how good he is, and he has not backed that up at all. You saw him against MVP, the post-fight. He was talking about how he cleaned him up all 3 rounds. Mate, you nearly lost that fight. You're delusional.
I don't want to have a go at Ian Gary because he cops a lot of hate online. And like I said, I don't think he's the biggest fan of us. At the end of the day, though, you're right. He was talking about how he was going to dog walk MVP. MVP outstruck him in that fight, mind you. It was a very boring fight. That's been widely known not widely known. Everyone has said that. It was one of the most boring fights.
If you watch the fight, the whole fight, Joe Rogan was saying, Ian Gary before the fight was saying he's quicker, he's going to try and outstrike him. And then he's like, it's not happening. So Joe Rogan was calling you delusional.
A lot of people have underestimated MVP's speed. But in the post-match conference, he's saying he thinks he won all 3, shouldn't have been a draw, when everyone was saying this very well could be a draw. Also, he was saying he rocked MVP in the second. He didn't rock anyone. I didn't see him land a punch, to be honest with you. He said he was going to come in and close the distance and dog walk him. He didn't do that. And then he was claiming that he kind of rocked him and he saw his eyes go back or something along those lines. I think he watched a completely different fight and he was in there.
I'm all for fighters talking the talk and trying to pump up toot their own horn. But you got to at least back it up when you're in the ring. Otherwise, you're going to get called a fraud. And that's what happened. He got called a fraud.
Any other honourable mentions for delusional fighters?
Michael Chandler's delusional because he thinks he's going to fight McGregor. But that's not really in the ring. It's not really that.
Okay,
I kind of feel sorry for him. That's why.
Ian Gary or Michael Chandler? Michael Chandler delusional because he thinks he's going to get this McGregor fight?
That's the only other person I could think that's deluded at the moment.
Okay, and who has been the best male fighter of the year so far?
MVP Alex Pereira.
Yeah.
The guy that's rocking up, he's Dana's guy right now. He's the MVP. If there was an actual award given out, I'm pretty sure Dana would love to give it to him. He even gave him $303,000 for the UFC 303 main event, performance of the night.
He basically asked for it in the octagon.
But I'm saying, he's like, you're my MVP, you're the fighter of the... This is basically the fighter of the year award for him. He's just giving him a bonus.
Well, he is consistently knocking people out. He's at whenever UFC call, he answers. He's even talking about potentially wanting to fight at UFC 305 in Perth. The guy's a freak. He's obviously chasing legacy. He's one of the most humble, down-to-earth fighters. I want to see his star continue to rise. I think he has been the best male fighter this year.
It's no question about it. There's no other fighter you can think of because really, there's been a few title changes. I think Volkanovski lost his title. Sugar Sean, he hasn't really first Cheeto Vera. That was an underwhelming fight for him. He probably should have fought someone a bit higher ranked. So there's no other fighters that have been really outstanding this year.
Okay, best female fighter so far.
Kayla Harrison. She's the only one I think I've actually watched the fight of.
Well, she's been one of the best UFC signings. She strangled Holly Holm until she fell asleep.
I'm actually she's the only female fighter I can say I'm looking forward to her next fight.
I also enjoy watching Zhang Weili.
She did have a good 300 fight, but again, Kayla Harrison outshone her.
At UFC 300, yes, because she couldn't put her opponent to sleep. The opponent woke up.
Well, she did put her to sleep, but she woke up. That's a technicality.
Exactly right. And it was a close fight. She has one of the more entertaining female fights. She's been dominant in her division. But you're right, Kayla Harrison, she's talking about fighting guys now. Is there anyone stronger as a female fighter?
No, and she's the female fighter of the year. Okay,
well, Nick, let's bring that over to boxing. Now, No Limit fight is tomorrow. Big for Wollongong, big for Australian boxing. Sammy Goodman versus Warwick, who is known as the Rock Man. What? Sammy Goodman getting the W?
Yeah, hometown crowd. The fix is in. He knows he's winning.
There's no fix, mate. You can't. I don't think
he's bringing some poor little Asian Thailand guy from down to the Wollongong. Mm-hmm. He's going to knock him out. Okay, I'm betting my money tomorrow on a Sam Goodman knockout. I'm backing that with Curtis Scott. We're taking the young NRL player against the old AFL player.
Okay.
And that's probably going to be the best 2 legs of your multi-net tomorrow night.
Sam Goodman into Curtis Scott. I like that little prediction.
And if we caught up with George Rose last week, he was saying as well, he's backing Curtis Scott. He knows his power.
Well, Sam Goodman wants this in-away fight in Japan. So I think he's going to try and knock this bloke out, not make a name for himself, but really
boost his stock a bit more.
Put on a show, boost his stock, cash in on this $1 million fight against one of the best fighters of this generation in a way. In Japan, I'd love to be over there and cover it with No Limit. That'd be great.
Never been to Japan before.
But also in boxing news, Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia has been expelled from the WBC. Okay, he's basically, for his social media antics, apparently he's been using the N-word. He's been going at Muslims online. But everything that's led up to him being crazy, he's pretty much been expelled, which means he is no longer able to fight under WBC regulation.
I think it gets bad when your parents have to put out a public statement and say, this is not our son, this is not what he's usually like. I mean, if your parents are disavowing what you're saying, you're probably saying something wrong.
I don't know if this is a part of the crazy gimmick. He's saying he went to rehab, but he's also now missed rehab so he can go to watch his brother, walk his brother out, be in his brother's corner on the Nate Diaz card. Look, I still enjoy Ryan Garcia.
He's entertaining.
I find him entertaining. I want to see him in the boxing ring. You know, you saw what happened when he went up against Devin Haney. It was fireworks. People got around it. It blew up social media. He won that fight, no matter whose record it's on and off. There's also been vision of him wrestling. He's been doing jiu-jitsu. He's been getting in the wrestling ring. Has he received a call from Dana in the UFC? If he can't fight for the WBC, I know there's other promotions that will want him, but for a fighter to get expelled, surely there's been other egregious things that other fighters have done. Mike Tyson's been to prison.
He got suspended.
There's been fighters that have had other racial slurs. Why is Ryan Garcia all of a sudden the whipping boy for boxing?
I feel like it's been a build-up, firstly. I mean, if you just read his tweets going back to before the Devin Haney fight, it's progressively getting worse, and he does look a bit crazy. From saying there was stuff going on in some forest where he's been touched as a kid. Okay. There's a whole lot of stuff going on.
You can't discount there was also testing positive for Ostarine. He's
That's
tested positive for banned substances.
He's got his record removed to a no contest for the fight against Haney.
Yeah.
He's been proven to have taken or tested positive. I don't know if it's true or not. I still believe him that he's innocent. But in saying that, there's just a build-up of things. And then if you're going to have these social media outbursts, WBC as an organization have to protect themselves. And it's an expulsion, but it's probably just a suspension. If they really want him back, they can just reverse it. It's very easy.
Well, I want to see Ryan Garcia, whether it's, obviously he's training for wrestling, whether that's in the UFC, whether he goes over to Saudi Arabia and fights on a Riyadh season card. You don't need the WBC for that. I do want to see him fight because he's one of the more entertaining boxers. Boxers need superstars. You saw Shakur Stevenson struggling to get 8,000 people sitting down and watching his fight in the Prudential Center, which we were at. We've been there. Big arena. 8,000 people there were a place where the UFC sold out 20,000 plus people. Again, boxing needs superstars. Otherwise, they're not selling fights. You got Canelo, you got Anthony Joshua, you got Tyson Fury. As far as American fighters go, who's putting bums in seats? Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney did.
Jordan Crawford, I think, can put on a fight. Errol Spencer's entertaining. But that's a bad look for boxing. 8,000 people to a boxing fight. It just furthers the narrative that boxing is becoming a dead sport. They can't really draw crowds. They can't really get the pay-per-view numbers that the UFC are getting. Is it a dead sport?
Yeah, it's not that it's dead sport. It's on the individual to sell their fights. It's not like they have a promotion like the UFC where you know you're going to get a pay-per-view every month and you're going to see some good fights, whether you like it or not. In boxing, they're their own promoters. They got their own promotions. And they have to sell themselves. And some fighters can do it, some fighters can't. Anthony Joshua is selling out Wembley Stadium.
Yep,
right? Apparently he sold almost 80,000 tickets for his fight against Dubois. So that guy is an English superstar. I don't know if you can.
It's on the individual.
It's on the individuals. That's what I'm saying.
And so you're saying these American fighters just don't have it anymore, or the UFC's just taking those fighters?
Listen, they need better marketing. You need Ryan Garcia level marketing. You need to be crazy. You need to. I'm sure for his next fight, his next marketing movie, he's going to be like coming out of prison like Mike Tyson did. It's like the big return fight. Maybe this is all a marketing ploy from Golden Boy Promotions. If it is, it's genius.
I'm saying the saving grace will be if Turk El Sheikh combines everything and creates a boxing UFC. If that does happen, I can see boxing making a massive resurgence.
We spoke to George Rose last week. He said, look, I'd love to see it happen. A one promotion boxing fight. Like if you get Matchroom, you get Golden Boy Promotions, you get a few others, PBC. He just said he wants to see more fights in Australia, but we're too far from everything. And all the big fights happen overseas. Like you said, Tim Tszyu, that happened overseas. I don't know. You have in this day and age, you need to make some social noise. Sugar Sean does it. He has his own podcast. Aljamain, they're all on YouTube.
They're trying to sell their personalities and their individual stardom.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't just be a Conor McGregor light. You've got to try and be an Alex Pereira who is doing his social media skits.
Yeah.
And a Sean Strickland who's captivated an American audience. You know what I mean? And some boxers just aren't doing that.
Well, because it's not that they're comfortable, but I feel like it's just the thing now that boxing, it's like the old school industry.
Talking UFC boxing. Anthony Joshua takes to Twitter and says, Alex Pereira should fight boxing sometime.
He said he should try his hand at boxing. And it does make sense for him to say that because Alex Pereira is one of the premier strikers in the UFC, which would lend well to boxing. But boxers would be way too quick for him, I'm just being honest.
Listen, former glory kickboxing champion. The guy can box. He's a striker.
He's a kickboxer. That's different. Boxing is very particular. A boxer would walk, like they'd just walk around and they'd be so quick. You'd understand the quickness that boxers have.
I mean, he does like a leg kick, but I mean, Conor McGregor transitioned very easily. Again, a great striker from the UFC. That went toe-to-toe with 10 rounds for Floyd Mayweather. Whether you want to say Floyd allow him to go 10 rounds or not,
Yes,
doesn't matter.
I will say that.
But is Anthony Joshua calling out Alex Pereira? Is he calling out Alex Pereira?
Is he trying to set up a super fight? It looks like it. I mean, why else are you trying to tell him to do that?
Listen,
Anthony Joshua's smart. He's trying to set up a super fight, and I understand it because boxing versus UFC is all people are talking about when it comes to, big superstars in the UFC. Can they cut it in boxing?
I'm not going to say, we've seen a lot of boxing versus UFC. We've seen Jake Paul going up against UFC fighters. We've seen McGregor versus Mayweather. It's happened. It's not like it's tried and tested. We've seen Francis Ngannou go over. But where this is interesting is Alex Pereira is the best striker in the UFC right now.
Okay, Francis Ngannou was the best striker in the UFC, and he got embarrassed.
No, well, I mean, he had a good showing against Tyson Fury. You can't
But
deny
man,
that.
like Tyson Fury got off the couch and went into that
But
fight.
tell me if you're Alex Pereira and you see this, and he thanked Anthony Joshua for that shout and said, listen, I'd love to give it a go. Don't get me wrong, I think they had to translate it, but he said, I'd love to give it a go. If you're Alex Pereira, you're 37 years old, you're making great money in the UFC, you just got a $303,000 bonus, but if you get the opportunity to fight Anthony Joshua in Saudi Arabia for tens of millions of dollars, how do you turn that down? How do you not want to do that?
Well, the monetary reasoning is enough alone to go make the transition. Probably runs his course in the UFC. Maybe even as champion will say, look, Dana, I've hit the end of my contract. I want this big money fight against a boxer. It probably will happen.
Do you think it's going to happen down the line? What's more likely to be seen? Alex Pereira go up to heavyweight or Alex Pereira has a boxing match?
I think he goes up to heavyweight first. I think it's actually an easier transition for him to go to heavyweight than become a boxer. To become a boxer for him would be way too hard. You've seen Francis Ngannou. You don't want to get knocked out like that. I'd rather lose by submission to Jon Jones in the heavyweight division than get knocked out by Francis Ngannou. It's an easy choice there.
Okay, I definitely see down the line whether he's pushing 40 and he does have a boxing super fight. I'd like to see it happen. I know Turk Al-Sheikh will probably put that on. The guy's one of the biggest superstars in the UFC. Could easily make the transition. But as we're talking about mid-season awards, we did talk about best knockdown of the year. Let's talk our top 5. We do this every week. Make sure you subscribe to @Kairouz Bros on YouTube and on Instagram @Jon-Bernard K, where we're putting up all our clips. But this week's top 5 is top 5 knockouts of all time. Nick, what's number 5?
Number 5, Conor McGregor knocking out Jose Aldo, the biggest knockout of all time for the industry. This was the start of the superstardom of Conor McGregor, and Mystic Mac called the knockout before it happened. Before the fight, he said he's going to try and go for that overhand left. I'm going to slip it and hit him with the left hand. Knocked him out to the floor, cold 13 seconds into the fight. And from there, Conor McGregor was born and he was unstoppable.
That kind of created the biggest superstar the UFC has ever seen. Like I said, the guy has the largest gate numbers in the UFC, largest pay-per-view numbers in the UFC. All from this. I mean, he had all of Brazil against him. He was taking his belt. It was an unbelievable press run. He wasn't even a villain, just a likable, the baddest man in the UFC, like one of the most entertaining out of the octagon fighters in the UFC.
This was the knockout that changed the UFC forever.
100%. Number 4, we're going with Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort. This was a clean kick straight to the jaw, bottom of the foot. Similar to how Michael Chandler
kicked Tony Ferguson
straight in the face. Kind of splitting image of it, but again, kicks him straight in the jaw, knocks straight out. Very gruesome. And a long list of Anderson Silva knockouts.
Well, he ate his foot. It's one of the worst knockouts to watch because the front kick is hard to see coming, and then when it finally connects, it kind of looks disgusting because when you get the side kick, it kind of hits you in the temple. But when you get the front kick, you're kind of eating someone's foot, which I kind of can't agree with. At number 3, we're going with Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren. The running knee 5 seconds into the fight. Now, the build-up to this fight was one thing. Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren, they hated each other. Ben Askren coming over as one of the biggest free agent signings in UFC history with the most disappointing start to his career ever. Jorge Masvidal ran straight in. Ben Askren didn't even see it coming. Knee straight to the head. Boom. And he was knocked out. Copped another couple punches for his troubles, and it was over.
This was the end of Ben Askren's career after that knee. It's very tough to watch. Again, one of the most gruesome knockouts. Knee straight to the head. One of the quickest fights you'll ever see. But also, what did Ben Askren go on to do after this, the poor bloke? Went on to fight Jake Paul and lose, get knocked out in a similar fashion. Not that it was that quick, but again, another brutal knockout. I think this is one of the most brutal knockouts in the UFC.
It's my favorite knockout to watch on highlights. Every time I'm watching UFC highlights, best knockouts of all time, when this one comes up, I give the biggest pop. And Ben Askren, you poor bastard, this is all you're known for.
Number 2, we're going with Kamaru Usman versus Leon Rocky Edwards. Now, this fight was done. It was done and dusted. Kamaru Usman had won. It was already done. And you could hear the coach in the background, Leon's coach, calling him. He's only got 1 round left. Leon, you have to go now. And Leon Rocky Edwards, it was like watching a Rocky film, kicks him in the head to finally complete his dream, win the welterweight title, was pretty much beat the longest reigning welterweight champion in Kamaru Usman. No one thought it could be done. The biggest underdog story, and that's why it's number 2. It's the story that goes behind it. Leon Edwards coming in, the biggest underdog in the UFC, kicks him to finish the fight. There was less than a minute to go. Kicks him straight to the head, and it's like watching a movie.
As a Kamaru Usman fan, this is very disappointing to watch. I feel for Kamaru Usman because he hasn't won a fight since now. But watching that, it's on every UFC highlight reel ever. In the build-up to every Leon Edwards fight, this is getting shown. His trainer in the corner spraying him getting up and returning with the head kick. There's no other better knockout except number 1, the best knockout of all time, Max Holloway knocking out Justin Gaethje, the buzzer beater knockout, UFC 300 for the BMF title. He points to the spot, and he was a bad motherfucker and went in and knocked him out. There's nothing better.
Again, it was UFC 300. It was the occasion. This is the WrestleMania of UFC. And to do that for the BMF title, when you already had the fight won, point to the spot and say, let's go. They're trading. He had already clearly won the fight against Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje underestimated Max. Going into this fight, everyone's saying Max was going to get cleaned up. Justin Gaethje's in line for a title shot.
It's too big for him.
And really, Max Holloway just changed the way the UFC is this year by knocking him out the way he did. Got a massive bonus. One of the most brutal knockdowns, the way he hit the mat. The memes that were created from this, the fanfare around it, it is definitely the biggest knockdown. It's definitely the biggest knockout of all time.
Max Holloway collected $600,000 for the performance of the night and the knockout of the night. Easily the best night of his life, collecting $600,000, probably more than any other check is collected in the UFC with how they pay. So for Max Holloway, you were the best knockout of all time and the best knockout of UFC 300.
I mean, it will be on replays till UFC 400 at the very least. But what I want to say about Leon Edwards on why I think that's neck and neck with Leon Edwards. He goes, this is for you, Mum. We finally did it. That's pretty much saying, yo, Adrian, we did it. It is Rocky.
It's a movie. It's a movie.
It was like watching a movie. So they are neck and neck for me. If it wasn't at UFC 300, Max Holloway definitely.
Look, it might be recency bias, but the fact that he pointed to the spot against Justin Gaethje, you got balls. So you're number 1.
Unbelievable. That is our top 5 knockouts of all time in the UFC. Make sure you subscribe to @Kairouz Bros. Now, Nick, let's talk our favorite sport. WWE.
I love it.
Okay, it is a sport, whether you like it or not, but it has been on a roll lately. We just watched Raw. Rhea Ripley's back, interrupting Dirty Dom and Liv Morgan. But what did you think of Money in the Bank? Let's get a little Money in the Bank recap. Would you think it lived up to the hype?
No, there was so many botches, and I'm not a fan of Drew McIntyre winning the Money in the Bank and cashing in the same night. If you're going to have him cash in, let him win, or let someone else win it. They did not advance the storyline between CM Punk and Drew at all.
I think it did. I mean, this is the 3rd time he's cost him his belt.
And he could have cost him in the ladder match. Like, it just made no sense. Like, someone like Jey Uso could have won it. LA Knight, who's desperate for something, could have won the Money in the Bank. They just fumbled the ball here.
I will say the botches were bad. There was botches in the women's match. There were botches in the men Money in the Bank match. The low blow from Tonga Loa. How do you stuff up a low blow? I don't know. Kind of embarrassing.
Hey, Damian Priest not kicking out. That's the worst one.
I don't know if he was knocked out there. That was pretty bad. Obviously, a rough night at the office for some of the wrestlers. It happens. But look, I definitely agree with you. They could have given the Money in the Bank briefcase to someone else. But it does play into the animosity between Drew McIntyre and CM Punk.
It was already there.
He's cost him his title every step of the way. WrestleMania, he's costed him for opportunities. And now he's actually cost him a cash-in again. I think this SummerSlam match is going to be the biggest feud of SummerSlam.
Look, I don't want to poke holes in the WWE storytelling and creative, but how did CM Punk know he was going to cash in? Was he just waiting there?
No, I mean, he was just there in case. I don't know.
How did he know he was going to win it? How did he know he was going to cash in? I mean, like, he should have cost him. It would have made so much more sense to just cost him in the ladder match.
Well, apparently, I saw videos he was hiding under the ring for almost an hour. So that's absolute commitment from CM Punk.
What do you do down there?
That's how much he hates Drew McIntyre. I think it's going to be a great feud, and it'll all be summed up at SummerSlam in Cleveland. But talking about returns, John Cena officially announces his retirement, saying he's going to WrestleMania 41 will be his last WrestleMania, and he's going to wrestle throughout to the end of the year to December 2025. How do you book John Cena's Kobe Bryant, retirement? How do you book his retirement run.
It is sad to hear that he's retiring. I'm very disappointed because I thought he would have an NWO Hulk Hogan type run before it was over.
Could happen. We got the final boss. We got a heel rock before.
But you can't hate a farewell of a legend. Kobe Bryant on his farewell tour, every opposing team loved him. They welcomed him into the building. So for his one, he's at least they've said 30 to 40 dates from January to December 2025. You got to finalize a lot of stories. You got to finalize the Randy Orton story. You maybe got to give him a feud with Cody Rhodes. Let him have another feud with Austin Theory. I think his whole gimmick for the next year and a half will be putting wrestlers over.
See, but that sucks. I don't want it to just be putting over guys. Kurt Angle did that, and look what it finished on. If his last match was with Baron Corbin,
that was disrespectful.
And it sucked. I don't want him to be putting over guys. I want it to be a generational final boss-like run, like The Rock. I want him to actually be having interesting feuds, like you said, Cody Rhodes. CM Punk says he wants to have a match with him before he goes. I want to see maybe one final run-in with him and The Rock. Brock Lesnar, maybe close that chapter. There's so much to do. There's also new superstars that have come through, like Jacob Fatu. Bron Breakker. I want to see John Cena cross paths with these guys, but the main feud, I think, would definitely be Cody Rhodes, passing the torch on to the new face of WWE. There's also maybe a last final Roman Reigns run-in I'd like to see. But look, if you're WWE now, who's John Cena's WrestleMania match?
Randy Orton. They've never versed each other one-on-one at WrestleMania, so that match needs to happen. They're the two fighters of their generation that need to have a WrestleMania match. They're the Austin and Rock of their generation. The fact that they haven't had a WrestleMania match is kind of disturbing.
Very true. Does it need a title?
I would like it to be the title. My dream scenario for John Cena is Randy Orton wins the title 2 more times. They have a title fight to see who wins number 17.
And overtakes Ric Flair's record.
And John Cena deserves the 17. He deserves to beat Ric Flair. Another alternate way to book him is the same way Ric Flair got booked. If you looked at Ric Flair before he got retired by Shawn Michaels, he was on about a 2-3 month winning streak. He was wrestling everybody from Carlito to Chris Masters. He was going around from Raw to Raw, beating everybody. Till he lost to Shawn Michaels. So for John Cena, I'm happy to see him go on a massive win streak, then finally lose at WrestleMania or wherever his last match may be.
John Cena, I'll give you the fake Marine salute. Thank you for your service.
No, you. You're retiring. You're selfish. Why are you leaving? The Rock is going to Hollywood and coming back all the time. You can come back whenever you like. You don't have to retire.
To do what John Cena did and carry the WWE after its hottest period, the Attitude Era, you got to give your hats off to him. He carried WWE for over 10 years. Full respect to him. I want to see you go on a dream retirement run. And hey, down the line, you never know. Never say never. He could always come back for a match. You never know. He keeps himself in great shape.
Selfishly, I'm disappointed.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see what's happened. SummerSlam is around the corner. I want to see who he's going to fight at WrestleMania. When's that going to start that build-up? But that's all for our WWE coverage right now. And that's all for Trash Talk today. Make sure you like and subscribe. And let us know in the comments what you want to see more of. But Nick, anything else you want to add?
No, mate, back to you in the studio, Ryan.